Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, all the way to the 1600s, to see if you have what it takes to survive a single day on a working ship. Forget everything you think you know about pirates and swashbuckling adventures. The reality is far more, well, let's just say less romantic and a lot more grimy. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're standing on the docks of a bustling port city like Bristol or Amsterdam. The air is thick with the smell of salt, tar, and unwashed humanity. You hear the creak of the ropes, the groan of the timbers, and the distant shouts of sailors. You've just signed your name, or more likely, made your mark, on a contract you can't even read. Becoming an apprentice sailor, a ship's boy, a greenhorn, the captain, a man with a face like a dried out prune, points to the gangplank. This is it. This is your new life. But let me be clear, you probably won't last the day. You're not a seasoned sailor. You're fresh off the street, and the sea is about to become your cruelest teacher. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere quiet, feel free to drop your location and the time in the comments. I love to see where these stories take us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto the deck, and your boots slip on a slick sheen of something. You don't want to think about what it is, but your gut tells you it's a mixture of brine, fish guts, and something a lot less pleasant that a rat might have left behind. The ship itself feels like a living, breathing beast. The planks beneath your feet shift and groan with the gentle roll of the tide, a sound that will become a constant companion. You look around, trying to take it all in, but the sensory overload is immediate. Your captain, who you'll soon learn is an imposing figure, stands by the mainmast. He says nothing, but his gaze sweeps over you, judging every inch of your landlubber posture. His silence is more intimidating than any shouting could ever be. You're an apprentice, not a passenger, and your status is immediately clear. Historians still argue whether the apprentice system was a form of indentured servitude or a genuine opportunity for advancement. But for now, it feels an awful lot like the former. You are at the bottom of the pecking order, below the cook, below the ship's cat, and perhaps even below the rats. Your first task is given to you by a weathered-looking quartermaster. Take this bucket, boy, and follow me. The bucket is heavy, made of thick, splintery wood, and the rope handle cuts into your palm. You're being initiated, and this is your first test, a test of strength, of will, and of the unyielding reality that this isn't a holiday cruise. It's a job, a hard, unforgiving job, and it's about to get a whole lot harder. The quartermaster, a man named Silas with a face like a crumpled map, leads you deeper into the ship's guts. The smells hit you with the force of a physical blow. You thought the dock was bad, but this is a whole new level of olfactory assault. The first layer is the thick, cloying sweetness of molasses and unrefined sugar, a scent that speaks of cargo holds and tropical trade. But that's quickly overwhelmed by the reek of bilge water, a soupy concoction of seawater, mold, and whatever has fallen into the lowest part of the ship and festered. It's the scent of decay, the smell of a forgotten, waterlogged world. Then there's the sharp, acrid odor of human waste. With no proper lavatories, the crew uses communal latrine boxes or simply finds a spot. The waste flushes directly into the sea, but the residual smell clings to everything. A constant, unpleasant reminder of the lack of sanitation. It's a bit like 100 port-a potties all left to bake in the sun and you're living inside of one. As you descend a narrow ladder, the air grows heavier, and a new scent emerges. It's the unmistakable smell of sick, a mixture of vomit, sweat, and feverish exhalations. You catch a glimpse of a man huddled in a dark corner, his face pale and green. This is your new reality. The pervasive and putrid smells of a working ship. You'll learn to identify them, to differentiate the stench of a leaking barrel from the musk of a sick crewmate. Historians still argue whether the terrible smell was a leading cause of psychological distress or merely a backdrop to the physical hardships. One thing is certain, you will never, ever get used to it. The sheer density of the smells is a form of pressure, a constant reminder of how far you are from the clean air and open spaces of home. It's a testament to the sheer toughness of the people who worked and lived in these conditions that they were able to function at all. You pass by a pile of what looks like discarded, tattered rags, And the smell of mildew and damp wool is so strong it makes your eyes water. Silas doesn't even flinch. He just grunts and keeps going, as if this is the most normal thing in the world. He leads you to a corner near the galley. The galley itself smells of wood smoke and a kind of greasy, boiled cabbage odor. But even that is not the most dominant scent. The most dominant is the smell of salt and sweat, the musk of hundreds of bodies packed into a confined space for weeks or months on end. It's the smell of work, of exertion, and of the absence of a decent bath. A quirky fact about these ships is that the lack of fresh water meant washing was a rare luxury. Sailors often used seawater, but it was a poor substitute for a proper scrub. Many sailors resorted to rubbing themselves with sand or even just a dry cloth to scrape off the grime. A kind of primitive exfoliation. The stench is your new reality. A constant presence that clings to your clothes, your skin, and your very soul. You realize with a sinking feeling that you will smell this way for the entire voyage. You'll become a part of the ship's own distinct ecosystem of smells. Silas finally stops and points to a large, wooden cask, bilge pump. He says simply, his voice a low growl. Your job is to get that water out. Now, the bucket feels heavier in your hand, and you realize this isn't just about hard work. It's about confronting and living with the things you'd rather not think about. This is your first day, your first chore, and your first lesson in the deep, sensory reality of life at sea. Your first chore is a lesson in tedium and exhaustion. You spend what feels like hours hauling up bucket after bucket of that foul bilge water. The rope chafing your hands. But eventually, the dinner bell, or rather, a loud, clanging pot lid, calls you away from the pump. You are hungry, a deep, gnawing hunger that you didn't even notice while you were working. You join a queue of sailors, all with the same tired, expectant look on their faces. The cook, a burly man with a permanent smudge of charcoal on his nose, hands you a wooden bowl and a small, hard biscuit. This is your first meal, and it introduces you to the unappetizing staples of the crew's food. The biscuit is what's known as hardtack, a dense, flavorless cracker made from flour and water. It's so hard you could use it as a weapon, and sailors often had to soak it in water or coffee to make it even remotely edible. You bite into yours and hear a sound like a tiny crackle. It's the weevils. Yes, the hardtack is infested with them. Little black specks moving around. This is a normal part of the diet. You either eat them for the extra protein or you pick them out. A meticulous, time-consuming process that feels pointless. The bowl contains what's called lobscouse, a kind of stew made from salted meat, vegetables if you're lucky, and biscuits, weevil-filled, of course. The meat is so salty and tough that you have to chew it for what feels like an eternity. It's a bit like chewing on a leather shoe that has been left to dry in the sun. You try to swallow a piece, but it feels like a lump of rubber in your throat. This is the reality of your diet. A diet designed for preservation, not for taste. Mainstream historical fact: scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, was a devastating problem for sailors on long voyages. The lack of fresh fruit and vegetables meant that crews would suffer from bleeding gums, open sores, and even death. It wasn't until the 18th century that a Scottish naval surgeon named James Lind proved that citrus fruits could prevent scurvy. But for you, here in the 1600s, that knowledge is a century away. A quirky tidbit about ship food is that many sailors were so resourceful they would catch the rats that infested the ship and add them to their stew for extra protein. You glance around and notice some of the older sailors looking at your weevil picking with a kind of weary amusement. They know you'll learn to just eat them. They are a part of the meal. Just like the salt and the hardtack. You try to eat your stew, but the taste is almost overwhelming. It's a bland, salty mush, and you can't quite shake the knowledge of what's in your hardtack. You look at the other sailors. They eat without a word. Their faces expressionless. They've done this 100 times. This isn't a meal, it's fuel. It's sustenance to get you through another shift, another day of work. The food is not meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to keep you alive. Historians still argue whether the psychological effect of this monotonous and unappetizing diet contributed to mutinies or was simply another accepted hardship of the sailor's life. But you can feel it. The grinding, numbing effect of eating the same bland food every single day. The hunger is still there. But now it's a different kind of hunger, a hunger for something fresh. Something green, something that hasn't been dried, salted, or preserved for a year. You finish your meal, the last remnants of the stew clinging to the bowl. And you realize that even this is a luxury. The bowl is licked clean. And you put it away, ready for the next chore. After your meal, you're shown where you'll be sleeping. You follow the quartermaster below deck again, this time to a part of the ship even more crowded and stuffy than the last. You pass by other sailors, some already asleep, their bodies curled into impossibly small spaces. This is the crew's living quarters. And the lack of space is astonishing. There's no privacy, no personal area to call your own. The air is thick with the smells of stale sweat and wet wool. You're pointed toward a small canvas sling hanging from the ceiling beams. This is your hammock. It looks simple enough, but you soon discover the uncomfortable, cramped reality of your sleeping quarters. There are no mattresses, no pillows, just a thin strip of canvas. You clamber into it, and it immediately twists and sways, threatening to dump you on the hard wooden floor. You finally manage to settle in, but you're constantly aware of the other bodies around you, their soft snores and the rustle of their movements. Every time someone shifts or a gust of wind hits the ship, your hammock sways, and you have to grip the sides to keep from falling out. It's a bit like trying to sleep in a gently rocking boat. Except you're already on a boat, which makes it a boatception of discomfort. The hammock is hung tightly to save space, which means you're almost touching the hammocks on either side of you. You can hear every cough, every groan, every whisper. The lack of solitude is a new kind of pressure, a mental fatigue that's just as draining as the physical labor. Mainstream historical fact: the use of hammocks on ships was a major innovation. Originally a Caribbean invention, they were adopted by the British Royal Navy in the 1590s. They were a significant improvement over sleeping on the deck or in bunks, as they allowed sailors to sleep with the rolling of the ship, which reduced the risk of falling out of bed during a storm. A quirky tidbit is that sailors would often use a spreader, a piece of wood, to keep their hammocks from wrapping around them like a cocoon while they slept. Without a spreader, you're constantly being squeezed by the canvas, a claustrophobic and uncomfortable experience. You try to get comfortable, but every position feels wrong. You can't stretch out, and your knees are bent uncomfortably. The knot at the end of the hammock is right where your neck wants to rest. A hard, unyielding lump that promises a stiff neck in the morning. Historians still argue whether the physical discomfort of sleeping in a hammock contributed to the general grumpiness and short tempers of the crew or was simply a minor inconvenience compared to the other hardships. But for you, it feels like a big deal. You can't find a single moment of true rest. You close your eyes, trying to block out the sounds and the smells. But it's impossible. You finally manage to drift off. But it's not a deep, restful sleep. It's a series of short, shallow naps punctuated by the creak of the ship's timbers, the sloshing of water, and the sounds of your shipmates. Your body feels like it's never truly at rest, and your mind is constantly on alert. The thought of being in this tiny, swaying sling for weeks or months on end is a new kind of terror. This isn't a bed, it's a suspension device, a human storage unit. You wake up with a jolt, unsure of where you are. For a split second, you forget you're on a ship. And then the reality of the smells and the swaying motion rushes back. The night has barely passed, and you're already exhausted. You untangle yourself from the hammock, your muscles aching, and you prepare for the next day. A day that promises to be just as hard and just as uncomfortable as the last. You've survived your first night, or what passes for a night, and the sun has yet to rise. But the ship is already a hive of activity. You emerge on deck, feeling every knot and ache from your night in the hammock. The air is still cold, but you can feel the promise of dawn on the horizon. As you begin your chores, a new kind of pressure descends upon you. It's the captain. You catch glimpses of him from a distance, standing on the quarterdeck, a place you're forbidden to go. He says nothing, but his presence is a constant, silent judgment. He's like a spooky, old-timey security camera. You feel his eyes on you, watching your every move. The captain's unpredictable, silent judgment is a key element of the ship's discipline. He doesn't need to shout to exert his authority. His very presence is enough to make you work faster, to straighten your back, to check your work a second time. He is the law, and his decisions are final. A wrong look, a moment of laziness, a mistake, and you could find yourself on the wrong end of his wrath. Mainstream historical fact: Captains in the 1600s held almost absolute power over their crew. They were the masters of the ship, and their word was law. They could order punishments, change the ship's course, and make life or death decisions without needing to consult anyone. This immense power was necessary for maintaining order and discipline on a long voyage where the crew was often a mix of seasoned sailors, indentured servants, and sometimes even press-ganged men. A quirky tidbit about this era's captains is that some believed their authority was divinely ordained. They saw themselves as miniature gods on the ocean, their ships as floating kingdoms. This belief system, while not universal, contributed to the air of untouchable authority that many captains exuded. Historians still argue whether this absolute power was a necessary evil for survival or a breeding ground for tyranny and abuse. But for you, the debate is moot. You can feel the power radiating from him. A silent, all-encompassing force. You watch him from the corner of your eye as you scrub the deck. He walks with a calm, measured pace, his hands clasped behind his back. He might be inspecting a coil of rope or watching the way the sails are trimmed. But you feel like he's really watching you. It's a bit like having your dad stand over your shoulder while you do your homework. Except your dad has a sword and can have you flogged. The other sailors seem to feel it too. They work in a silent, efficient rhythm, their movements economical and precise. They've learned that a quiet, diligent sailor is a forgettable sailor, and being forgotten is the best possible outcome. This constant sense of being observed creates a different kind of exhaustion. It's not just the physical work, it's the mental strain of always being on. You can't relax, you can't let your guard down. Even when the captain isn't on deck, you feel his ghost. You know he could appear at any moment. And you want to be caught doing your job, not loafing. This is not just a ship, it's a social system. And you are at the bottom. Your place is to work, to obey, and to stay out of sight. The sun finally crests the horizon, casting a golden light on the deck. It should be a beautiful sight, but all you can think about is the long day of labor ahead. And the silent, watchful figure who holds your fate in his hands. The sun is now fully up, and the day's work truly begins. Your first task is to help a grizzled old sailor untangle a massive length of thick rope. A snarled mess of hemp and tar. The rope is heavy, and the knots are tight, but you're expected to work at the same frantic pace as your shipmate. The day is filled with these endless chores and backbreaking labor. You might spend an hour polishing brass, a mindless task, only to be sent to scrub the deck again, a task you now know is a constant. Then you're hauling sacks of cargo, mending a tear in a sail, or working the capstan to raise the anchor. Every single job is physically demanding and repetitive, and there is no rest. Your muscles, which were already tired, begin to burn with a new, deeper kind of fatigue. You're constantly moving, constantly bending and lifting. Your back screams in protest. Your hands are raw from the rope, and you're sweating through your clothes. The sun beats down on the deck, and you can feel it baking you. There is no shade, no moment to catch your breath. You're just a cog in a massive machine, and the machine never stops. Mainstream historical fact. The average working day for a sailor in the 1600s was from sunrise to sunset, often stretching even longer during emergencies or bad weather. There were no weekends, no holidays, and no sick days. If you couldn't work, you were a liability, and a liability was a burden on the ship's resources. A quirky tidbit is that sailors often sang sea shanties while they worked. These rhythmic songs weren't just for entertainment, they served a practical purpose. They helped to coordinate the crew's movements for heavy tasks like raising the sails or heaving the anchor, turning a group of exhausted men into a single, synchronized force. You hear them now, a slow, mournful chant that feels a lot like the beat of a dying drum. Historians still argue whether the constant labor was a form of psychological conditioning to keep the crew too tired to rebel or simply a necessary reality of maintaining a wooden ship at sea. But for you, the debate is simple. It's just exhausting. Your body feels like a lead weight. You trudge from one task to the next, your mind numb with fatigue. You make a small mistake. You forget to tie a knot in a certain way. Or you drop a heavy tool, and a sailor shouts at you. A harsh, clipped word that makes you jump. There's no room for error. A dropped tool can mean a broken bone. A poorly tied knot can mean a lost sail. On a ship, mistakes have real, immediate consequences. You want to sit down, just for a moment, to close your eyes, To feel the relief of not moving. But you can't. There are always eyes on you. A constant, unspoken pressure to keep working. The sun climbs higher, and the day stretches out before you. An endless expanse of back-breaking labor. You can't even tell how much time has passed. It could be an hour. Or it could be a day. Time has lost all meaning. It's just a continuous, exhausting cycle of work, and you realize with a sinking feeling that this is what your life will be for the next several months. You are jerked awake from a shallow, dreamless sleep by the sound of a horn blaring and the frantic shouts of the quartermaster. The ship lurches violently to one side, throwing you against the rough wooden wall. The air is suddenly cold and thick with spray. You have a moment of pure confusion before the reality hits you. A storm is upon you. You scramble onto the deck, and the wind hits you like a solid wall. The ship is no longer a gentle, swaying beast, it's a living thing, fighting for its life against the terrifying power of the sea. This is the moment you experience the weather's fury and the ship's fragile dance. Rain lashes down in horizontal sheets, and the waves, which were once a gentle swell, are now monstrous, gray mountains that rise up and threaten to swallow you whole. The crew is a blur of activity. Their faces grim and set. They are not fighting the storm, they are trying to manage the ship's response to it. Your job is to grab a line and help the others secure the sails. A dangerous task that involves clambering up the rigging. You look up, and the mast, which seemed so solid just hours ago, is now swaying back and forth like a reed in the wind. Mainstream historical fact. Storms were the greatest single threat to sailing ships in the age of sail. They could rip sails to shreds, snap masts like twigs, and smash a ship against a rocky shore. Many more ships were lost to bad weather than to pirates or enemy navies. A quirky tidbit is that sailors would often hold a small, religious icon or a charm to ward off the storm, a blend of superstition and faith that was a common sight on these voyages. Historians still argue whether the sailors' fear of the supernatural or their knowledge of the natural world was the greater motivator during the storm. You start to climb, your hands raw and slick with rain. The wind howls in your ears, a deafening shriek that drowns out all other sound. You're soaked to the bone in seconds, and the cold seeps into your bones. Every time the ship rolls, you have to cling to the rigging with all your strength, your body swaying precariously over the churning, dark water below. You can see the waves crashing over the bow, sending a torrent of cold seawater across the deck. A wave hits the side of the ship with a sound like a cannon shot, and you feel the entire vessel shudder from the impact. A sailor near you loses his grip for a second, and a collective gasp goes up from the crew. He manages to hold on, but the look on his face is pure, unadulterated terror. He looks at you for a moment, and you see a reflection of your own fear. This is not an adventure. This is a battle for survival. You're not just fighting the sea, you're fighting the fear that threatens to paralyze you. The storm rages for what feels like an eternity. You don't know if it's been an hour or a day. Time loses all meaning in the face of such raw, chaotic power. The ship groans and creaks, every timber straining against the force of the waves. You feel like the whole thing could come apart at any moment. That you're just a speck of wood on a vast, unforgiving ocean. Finally, the winds begin to die down, and the rain slackens. The waves are still massive, but they're no longer breaking over the deck. You cling to the rigging, your body trembling with cold and exhaustion, and you look around at your fellow sailors. They are all as pale and tired as you are, but there's a shared look of relief in their eyes. You survived your first storm, and the experience has changed you. You're no longer just a boy on a. In the days after the storm, the work continues, but a new, more insidious threat begins to take hold of the crew. You notice it first in the older sailors. One man, a wiry fellow named Thomas, begins to complain of his gums. You look at him, and his gums are a deep, angry red, almost purple. They bleed when he talks, when he eats, when he does almost anything. Soon, open sores appear on his skin that refuse to heal, and his joints begin to swell. This is scurvy, your new vitamin C nemesis. You watch as your shipmates succumb to the debilitating effects of this disease. It's a slow, terrifying process. The disease affects every part of the body. Their teeth begin to loosen and fall out. Their limbs become weak and useless. They are perpetually exhausted, but they cannot sleep because of the pain. The ship's surgeon, a somber man you've barely seen, makes a few perfunctory rounds. But there is nothing he can do. Mainstream historical fact. Scurvy was one of the deadliest diseases on long sea voyages, killing more sailors than all other ailments, accidents, and battles combined. For centuries, its cause was a mystery. Sailors believed it was caused by bad air, hard work, or even sadness. It wasn't until the 18th century that a Scottish physician, James Lind, proved that a lack of fresh vegetables and citrus fruits was the cause. But on this ship, a century earlier, the knowledge is simply not there. The only cure is a fresh port. But you are still a long way from land. A quirky tidbit about scurvy is that it could cause old wounds to reopen. A scar you got in a childhood fall, a broken bone that healed years ago, all could suddenly become painful again. A grotesque reminder of a past you thought was safely behind you. Historians still argue whether the psychological terror of watching your body fall apart from scurvy was more damaging than the physical symptoms. You can see the fear in the eyes of the other sailors. They know what's happening, and they know there is nothing they can do to stop it. They watch Thomas and the others, their faces pale and drawn, and they wonder if they will be next. Every day, you check your own gums. You poke at your limbs, looking for a sign of swelling. You feel a new, constant, low-level anxiety that accompanies every new ache and pain. Is this just fatigue, or is it the first sign of the dreaded disease? The ship's supplies are running low. The hardtack and salted meat are all you have, and you know there are no fresh vegetables or fruit to be had. The scurvy spreads through the ship, a silent contagion that preys on the malnourished bodies of the crew. You see a man who was once strong and boisterous, now a huddled, pathetic figure, his teeth loose in his mouth. The ship becomes a hospital, a floating graveyard of sick and dying men. The wind down of the storm brought a temporary relief, but now the ship is quiet, not with a sense of calm, but with a sense of dread. The only sounds are the creak of the ship and the occasional pained groan of a sick man. This is the reality of a long voyage. You faced the fury of the sea, but now you face the fury of your own body. A slow, inevitable march toward illness and, perhaps, death. As you trudge through the day, you've realized that the physical hardships are only half of the challenge. You are never, ever alone. There is no privacy, not even for a thought. You're always surrounded by people. Below deck, the hammocks are so close you can hear the man next to you breathe. On deck, a task that requires one person is often done by two, and a task for two is often done by 10. There is always a body in your way, always a voice in your ear, always the low hum of shared humanity. You can't escape. You long for just a moment to yourself, to close your eyes and be in your own head without the constant, oppressive presence of others. But it's impossible. You eat with the crew, you work with the crew, and you sleep with the crew. Even the simple act of using the latrine boxes is a public affair, with no walls or doors to separate you. This complete lack of personal space or solitude is a new kind of torture. It's a bit like being in an elevator that never stops, except the elevator is filled with a dozen tired, smelly strangers and smells like a forgotten gym bag. Mainstream historical fact. The lack of privacy was a significant source of tension and conflict on ships. Small disputes could easily escalate into brawls due to the constant proximity and lack of a quiet space to de-escalate. A quirky tidbit is that sailors would sometimes try to create a small, private space by hanging a piece of cloth or a blanket over their hammock. A simple, futile effort to cordon off a slice of the world for themselves. You watch an old sailor do this, and you feel a pang of sympathy. He is not trying to hide from anyone, he is simply trying to find a moment of quiet. A single, uninterrupted second to himself. Historians still argue whether this lack of privacy was a deliberate tool of the captain to prevent mutiny by keeping everyone under constant surveillance or simply a result of the practical limitations of space on a ship. But to you, it feels like a heavy blanket, a constant pressure that never lifts. You find yourself retreating into your own mind, trying to build a small, mental fortress where you can be alone. But even there, the sounds and smells of the ship intrude. The constant hum of voices, the creak of the timbers, the slosh of the bilge water, it all becomes a part of your mental landscape. You can't think clearly. You can't even remember what it felt like to be alone. You feel like your thoughts are not even your own anymore, that they are a shared commodity, out there for everyone to see. There is no quiet. No peace. No respite from the human sea around you. You look at the sky. A vast, beautiful expanse of blue, and you feel a sudden, intense yearning for its solitude. The ocean is vast, and the sky is endless. But you are trapped in a small, wooden box, surrounded by the physical reality of 100 other people. You're just a part of the herd, a member of a flock, and you're expected to act as such. You learn to move with the group, to work with the group, and to exist in a state of perpetual communal living. And you realize, with a heavy heart, that you will not feel the touch of solitude again until you reach the land. And even then, it will be hard to shake the feeling of 100 eyes on you. The sun beats down on the deck, and you're hauling another bucket of bilge water. Your throat is parched, your lips cracked. The heat and the relentless work have you fantasizing about a single cup of cold, fresh water. You've been drinking a murky, foul-tasting liquid from a shared barrel, a liquid that the cook calls water, but you know is a mixture of rainwater, whatever has fallen into the cask, and the residue of who knows what. Then you see it, a crewmate standing by the mainmast, carefully pouring a small amount of liquid from a ceramic jug into a wooden cup. You see the color of it, clear, pristine, and it looks like a miracle. You encounter the surprisingly scarce and precious resource of potable water. The man notices you looking and gives you a small, conspiratorial grin. "First voyage, lad," he says, his voice a low rumble. "You'll learn soon enough. Water's the real treasure on this ship. More than gold or spices. You've heard of water rationing, but to see it in person is a different experience." Mainstream historical fact. Fresh water was a precious commodity on long sea voyages and was often rationed to a few pints per sailor per day. It was stored in wooden barrels, which often leaked or became contaminated over time. Sailors would sometimes add vinegar or alcohol to their water to make it more palatable and to kill some of the bacteria, a practice that made the water even more unappetizing. A quirky tidbit is that the water would often turn a dark brown or green over time, sometimes even containing strange, slimy organisms, which the sailors called wigglers. They would drink the water anyway, because it was all they had. Historians still argue whether the scarcity of water was a greater source of physical and psychological hardship than the lack of food. But for you, the answer is clear. You can last a day without food, but you can't last long without water. The man with the jug takes a long, slow sip, and you watch the clear liquid disappear down his throat. It's a moment of pure envy, a feeling so intense it almost hurts. You trudge back to your work, the reality of the water situation a new, heavy weight on your mind. You will learn to savor every drop. You will learn to drink the wiggler water without complaint. And you will learn to never, ever take fresh, clean water for granted again. You get a small ration of water later in the day, and it's so precious you don't even gulp it. You take small, measured sips, letting the liquid roll over your tongue. It's warm and tastes of the wood from the barrel, but it's wet, and that's all that matters. You see a man who has finished his ration, and he looks at the empty cup with a kind of desperate longing. The ship is a world of constant wants. You want to be clean. You want a good meal. You want to be alone, but above all, you want water. You finish your small ration and realize that you are now a part of a grim ritual, a daily struggle for a resource that you used to take for granted. This isn't just a ship, it's a floating desert. And you're a thirsty traveler with no oasis in sight. The days blend into one long, grueling, exhausting stretch. You've learned to work with your body numb with fatigue, to eat the weevil-infested food, and to crave the few sips of murky water you're allowed. But then a new kind of lesson arrives. You hear a commotion on the main deck, a mix of angry shouts and the sharp crack of a lash. You rush over with the other sailors, and you witness your first official punishment. A young boy, not much older than you, is being held by two older sailors. He's been caught stealing a piece of salted beef from the cook's stores. The captain, standing impassively with his hands clasped behind his back, nods to the bosun, a man with a stern face and a thick rope whip. "This is your introduction to discipline by the lash and the stock." The bosun raises the lash and brings it down on the boy's back. The crack of the whip echoes across the silent deck, and the boy cries out, a sound that makes your stomach turn. One lash, then another, then another. The punishment is swift and brutal, a public spectacle designed to teach a lesson to all. The boy is then put in the stocks. A wooden frame that locks his head and hands in place, leaving him to sit in shame for the rest of the day. Mainstream historical fact: corporal punishment, including flogging, was a common and accepted form of discipline on ships. Captains had the authority to order these punishments for everything from theft to insubordination to fighting. The severity of the punishment varied greatly from ship to ship, but it was a constant threat that loomed over every sailor. A quirky tidbit is that in some cases, a sailor's punishment could be commuted or changed. For a very minor offense, a captain might order a sailor to be ducked, which involved hoisting him up and dunking him into the sea 3 times. A bit like an impromptu, very unpleasant baptism. Historians still argue whether the extreme discipline on these ships was a successful deterrent against mutiny and crime or if it simply fueled resentment and rebellion. But for you, seeing it in person, the answer is visceral. You are no longer just an apprentice. You are a part of a system where a simple mistake can lead to a violent and painful public punishment. You watch the boy in the stocks, his face stained with tears and humiliation, and you understand with a new clarity that there is no mercy on this ship. The law is the captain, and the punishment is the whip. The knowledge sinks into you, heavy and cold. It's a weight you now carry with you on every step, on every chore. You are no longer just working, you are working to avoid punishment. The fear of the lash is a new motivator, a silent, ever-present force that drives you forward. You look around at the other sailors, and you see the same look in their eyes. A quiet fear, a resigned acceptance. This is the way of the world. This is the way of the ship. And you realize, with a heavy heart, that the freedom you sought by coming to the sea is a cruel illusion. You are a prisoner on a floating island, and the captain is the warden, and there is no escape. The sun beats down on the deck, but you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. You've learned to fear the captain, to fear the lash, and to fear the sea. But as the days turn into weeks, you realize a new, more pervasive fear. Pirates are the least of your worries. The romantic image of skull and crossbones flags and thrilling sword fights is replaced by the far grimmer reality of what actually threatens a 1600 sailor. The first and most common threat is your own ship and your own crew. An old sailor, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and scars, tells you a story one night. He speaks of a fire in the hold, a simple accident that burned an entire ship to the waterline in a matter of hours. Or a man who fell from the rigging during a calm day, his body never to be seen again. You learn that the sea itself is full of silent killers. A man can get a splinter in his hand and die of a festering infection days later. A sudden gust of wind can snap a mast and send it crashing onto the deck, crushing anyone in its path. And then there's disease. You already know about scurvy, but there's also typhus, dysentery, and a dozen other illnesses that can sweep through a ship like a phantom, taking a handful of men at a time. Mainstream historical fact: disease and accidents were responsible for far more sailor deaths than combat or piracy. The close quarters, poor sanitation, and lack of medical knowledge made ships breeding grounds for illness. A quirky tidbit is that sailors would often make small, carved tokens or talismans to protect themselves from these mundane but deadly threats. A small whalebone carving of a fish for protection against drowning, or a carved piece of wood to ward off bad luck. These were not for show. They were a serious attempt to exert some small amount of control over an unpredictable and dangerous world. Historians still argue whether the fear of these everyday threats was a more effective form of social control than the threat of violence from the captain. But for you, the terror is palpable. You are surrounded by things that can kill you at any moment. And none of them are wearing an eye patch. You are a walking disaster waiting to happen. The pirates, when they do appear, are almost a relief. At least you can fight a pirate. At least you can see a pirate coming. But how do you fight a fever? How do you fight a piece of rotten wood? You realize that your life is not a grand adventure. It's a tightrope walk over a pit of 1,000 mundane and lethal dangers. A new kind of humility settles over you. You are not the hero of a story. You are a statistic waiting to be counted. The old sailor finishes his story, his face grim. Pirates, he says, a faint smile on his lips. Pirates are the least of our worries. You nod, and you believe him. You have learned that the greatest threats in life are often not the ones you can see. They are the ones that are right under your feet, waiting for you to slip. The ship has settled into a routine of suffering, and you've accepted your place in it. But then one day, a sailor falls from the mainmast. He doesn't fall far, maybe 10 feet, but he lands awkwardly, and a bone in his leg snaps with a sickening crack that everyone on deck hears. The groans of the injured man echo across the ship, and you are called to help carry him below deck to the sick bay. This is where you meet the ship's doctor, a grim figure, and dread the limited medical care available. The surgeon, a gaunt man with a tired look and hands that look like they've seen too many broken bones, examines the sailor's leg. The sick bay is a dark, cramped, and unsanitary space. The air is thick with the smell of old blood, unwashed bodies, and the faint, coppery scent of death. His tools are laid out on a rough wooden table, a saw, a scalpel, and a collection of other rusty, menacing-looking instruments. You want to look away, but you can't. Mainstream historical fact: ship surgeons in the 1600s often had no formal medical training. Their skills were limited to basic first aid, setting bones, and amputation. They had no understanding of germs or sanitation, and a simple cut could easily lead to a deadly infection. A quirky tidbit is that the surgeon's pay was often tied to the number of living men he returned to port, which gave him a financial incentive to keep the crew alive, even if it meant a painful, botched procedure. You watch as the surgeon goes to work. He has no anesthetic, so the sailor's only relief is a piece of leather to bite down on. The sailor screams, a horrifying, guttural sound that will haunt your nightmares. The surgeon sets the bone, but it's a rough, painful process. He then wraps the leg in a dirty bandage. You can see the sailor's face, pale with pain and shock, and you realize that if you get hurt, this is the care you will receive. Historians still argue whether the presence of a surgeon, no matter how limited their skills, was a comfort to the crew or a source of more fear. But for you, the answer is clear. You dread the idea of ever having to go to the sick bay. The surgeon is not a healer, he is a last resort. The sick bay is not a place of comfort, it is a place of suffering. You leave the sick bay, the screams of the injured man still ringing in your ears. You trudge back to your work, a new, heavy weight on your shoulders. You are no longer just afraid of the dangers of the ship, you are afraid of the cure. You are afraid of the healer. You realize with a cold dread that your greatest hope for survival lies in never getting sick or injured. The ship has become your entire world, and the outside world, the one with trees and fresh grass, seems like a distant, half-forgotten dream. You've faced the storm, the scurvy, the brutal discipline, and the sheer drudgery of life at sea. But now, you get a glimpse into a different kind of skill, one that separates a professional sailor from a landlubber like you. You're on watch one night, a vast blanket of stars above you, so many more than you've ever seen before. The ship's navigator, an older, quiet man, is standing by the binnacle, the small wooden stand that houses the compass. He holds a celestial globe, a small, intricate model of the heavens. This is your first look at navigating without GPS or a chart. You see him consult a sextant, an ornate brass instrument that he uses to measure the angle of the stars above the horizon. He points to a star, Polaris, the North Star, and explains that its height above the horizon tells him their latitude. Then he tells you about a chronometer, a special clock that keeps time at Greenwich, a detail that seems impossibly precise in this world of guesswork and hardship. Mainstream historical fact: navigation in the 1600s was a mix of art and science. Sailors used a compass for direction, but they relied on the stars and the sun for a celestial fix, which would tell them their latitude. However, they had no accurate way to determine their longitude until the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century, which allowed them to keep track of the time at a fixed point and thus calculate their position east or west. A quirky tidbit is that navigators often had to rely on dead reckoning, a method of estimating a ship's position based on its course, speed, and the time it has traveled. It was an educated guess, a kind of best effort estimation that was often laughably inaccurate. You would be in a boat, a floating guesswork machine. Historians still argue whether the navigator's skill was a form of esoteric knowledge or a practical art that anyone could learn with enough practice. But to you, it feels like magic. The navigator looks at the sky and speaks of invisible lines and ancient constellations. And you realize that he is not just sailing a ship, he is sailing the heavens. He is a priest in a temple of stars. You see the compass, a small, spinning piece of metal, and you understand its immense importance. It is the only thing that connects you to the known world. It is a promise that you are not utterly lost. The navigator finishes his calculations, and he makes a small mark on a chart. He is a guide, a map maker, a person who can see the invisible and make it real. You feel a small spark of hope. You are not just adrift, you are on a journey. And someone knows where you're going. The days and nights of endless labor, the constant hunger, the fear, and the pervasive stench, it all becomes a single, long memory. One morning, you wake to a new kind of sound, the cry of gulls. A sound that is not the familiar shriek of the open ocean birds but the specific, hopeful cry of gulls that live near land. The air, which has been heavy with the smell of tar and salt for months, suddenly carries the scent of wet earth and pine trees. You rush to the railing with the other sailors. And there it is. Land. A faint, green smudge on the horizon that grows larger and more distinct with every passing hour. This is it. Arrival. A new but still hard life. The ship, which was once your prison, is now your salvation. The work suddenly feels lighter. The sails are trimmed with a new energy. And the anchor is heaved with a sense of purpose. You are no longer just surviving, you are arriving. Mainstream historical fact. The moment of landfall was a powerful and often emotional experience for sailors. It meant the end of the hardships of the open sea, the promise of fresh food, clean water, and a break from the constant, life-threatening dangers of the voyage. For many, it was a moment of profound relief and gratitude. A quirky tidbit is that sailors would often hold a small celebration on the deck as the ship approached port, singing songs and sharing what little food or drink they had left. A final communal act of triumph before they dispersed on land. Historians still argue whether the experience of a long sea voyage created a stronger bond between the crew or if it simply heightened their desire for solitude. As you get closer, you see the port, a bustling, chaotic world of color and sound. The smell of fresh bread, of roasting meat, and of clean, damp earth is so overwhelming it makes you feel dizzy. You watch as the anchor drops with a final, satisfying splash. The journey is over, but your life as a sailor has just begun. You are no longer an apprentice. You are a man who has faced the sea and lived. You have endured the hunger, the constant work, the fear, and the stench, and you are changed by it. You are a part of a select, hardened fraternity. You are no longer that naive boy from the docks. You are a sailor. You trudge down the gangplank, your boots on solid ground. Your legs feel like they're still on the ship, swaying slightly with a ghostly rhythm. You are on land, but a part of you is still on the sea. The world feels too big, too open, too loud. You look back at the ship, a massive, unyielding beast that was your home, your prison, and your protector. You have survived, but you will never truly be the same. The journey has ended, but a new chapter in your life, a life of hardship and perseverance, has just begun. The sun is setting now, casting a golden light on the old wooden docks. The sounds of the day are beginning to soften, the sharp cries of the gulls giving way to the low hum of the evening. Your journey is over for now. You have endured the storms and the sickness, the hunger and the endless work. You are safe. The ground beneath your feet is solid and unmoving, a welcome relief from the constant motion of the sea. It's time to let go of the day's troubles, to let the exhaustion of the journey carry you towards sleep. Feel the cool air on your skin, and listen to the soft, rhythmic sound of the waves lapping against the shore. Your mind is quiet, your body is heavy. There is nothing to worry about, just the gentle sound of the water, the quiet of the coming night, and the comfort of your own breathing. Let go of the thoughts that keep you awake, and let the peace of this moment wash over you. There is only the here and now, a moment of rest before you drift off to a peaceful and well-deserved sleep. All is calm.